No. No. Why am I saying that? I think I already said that. Don't say that. Pretend that didn't happen. That is not what you want happening. What is going on here? I thought we had some of those friggin' normal pliers. Okay. Are these even, they seem like they're too big. Everything is oily. Shoot. Dang it. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be working on the 4-speed ratchet top transmission out of my dad's shovel head, and it looks as though it's going to need a little more than just some seals and gaskets. I've already had the top off, I've got my kicker cover off, and I've taken a look inside of the transmission. The gears look good and everything, but the countershaft end play is more than 3 times what it should be, and the shifter forks are not centered between the gears as they're meant to be. I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about, and then I'm going to start pulling this thing apart, and I'm going to go over all the parts and everything and figure out what I need, because whatever parts I'm going to need, I'm going to have to order, and hopefully it doesn't take too long for them to get here. So I've already taken all of my bolts out of the top shifter cover. You got 2 longer bolts in here, but other than that, the rest of them are all the same length, with the exception of a breather bolt that has to go back in this hole closest to the dowel pin. And that bolt is noticeably different than the rest, so it's actually got a flathead bit on it rather than the Allen head bits like them, and you can see the hole there where it breathes, so that just lets pressure out as the transmission heats up, and that's got to go back in this hole that's situated closest to this dowel pin on the right side of the transmission. I'm just going to pull my cover off. That just pops right off. So this is the countershaft here, and then this is the main shaft. You probably can't see it there, but the countershaft I noticed had quite a bit of end play in it. It's meant to have between 7 and 12 thou for end play, which this, like I said, has got about triple that. Triple the maximum. It's got about 36 thou end play. So I'm going to actually put a 20 thou feeler gauge in there and select quite a bit of slop. I'm going to have to take my countershaft out and replace the thrust washer with something a little thicker, and then my shifter forks are meant to be centered between the gears that they're shifting. So I'm just going to show you guys how to check the alignment of your shifter forks if you don't have a tool. So you're going to take your shifter cover and you want to make sure that it's actually in neutral for this. You want your shifter forks actually sitting in the straight sections on the shifter cam here. You can pop this on just lightly onto the dowel pins. And then when you take it off, you want to be able to take it off kind of gently and just kind of roll it off without moving it side to side, because you don't want your shifter forks moving from where they are. So you're just going to roll it off kind of like that, but you guys probably get the idea. I can't really do it perfectly. But anyway, that should have your shifter forks sitting where they would be sitting if the bike was in neutral. And that's where you want to center them. So mine are not centered at all. I actually have a nice Jim's tool here, 2 of my dad's. So I'm going to double check the whole thing. And this is actually made for checking that your shifter forks are centered. So now how you are going to use this tool is you're going to take it and you are going to place it in where the dowel pins would go. And then you're going to take this pin that the tool comes with, you're going to slide it down. So you just want that pin sitting in the straight section on your shifter cam, and then you're going to do this block up so that it can't move. And then same thing on this side, you're going to put it into the straight section on your shifter cam, and that's lined up good there. So I'm going to do that up tight so that it can't move. Okay. And now that you got your tool set, you can place it on top of the gearbox and check your shifter forks and where they are going to be positioned when the top is on the transmission. So with my tool set, I'm going to take it now, and you can see these 2 holes on the tool there. Those sit on the dowel pins. So this is a pretty foolproof tool, which makes the job super easy. You're going to put that on the shifter forks, on the dowel pins, with the shifter forks inside of it. I honestly like this tool because I feel like it's a lot easier to get like an accurate reading. Now that you've got this all set up, you want to just check and make sure that your shifter forks are centered between the gears. It's kind of hard to tell with my countershaft being so sloppy because I think that shifter fork probably would be centered if my countershaft weren't so sloppy, if it had the proper amount of end play in there. My other shifter fork is actually not very centered at all. So I'm definitely gonna have to take my shifter forks out and put some shims in there to center them between the gears. And my countershaft is for sure gonna have to come out because I need a new thrust washer in there. So I'm just gonna be starting on that. Shifter forks will be coming out first. And to take the shifter forks out, you need to actually take your sprocket off because the shifter shaft slides out, the sprocket gets in the way of it. So I'm gonna be doing that first, and then my countershaft will be ready to come out. So I'm gonna take my drive sprocket nut off, the main shaft here, and this is one thing that's super handy about having a transmission stand, guys. This is just a homemade transmission stand out of box tubing and angle iron, but I've actually got it clamped to my bench here, so I'm not gonna have to be wrestling with the transmission while I try to undo this nut. And I've got my homemade socket here, so if you guys want to see how I made this socket, then you can go back. I'll link a video here. And one thing that's really important to remember too is that the nut on this sprocket is actually a reverse thread, so you want to make sure you're turning that off to the right to loosen it, to the left to tighten it. You don't want to wreck that. Another thing too is you want to make sure that your shifter forks are both locked into a gear, because that will actually lock your transmission up. So you can just slide your shifter forks so that they're both actually grabbing a gear, and that'll actually lock your transmission up so it won't be able to spin. And I'm just hoping that this is not on here too tight. Okay, that's not too tight. Perfect. Now that's loose, I can take my sprocket off and then I should be able to get my shifter fork shaft out. All right, so I can take my sprocket off now. Well, that seal is obviously completely destroyed. Got my lock washer, pull that off. And just pull my sprocket off. I'll also be replacing the sprocket. And then this shifter shaft is held in place with actually like a clip here. Right here, there's a clip. Some of them are actually held in place with like a little set screw that would go in here. Yeah, that's I think the earlier models anyway, but this one is held in with a clip, so I'm gonna get my C-clip pliers. There we go. So at this stage, if you don't already have your kicker cover off, you can take it off, and then there's actually just a little hole in there that you can actually put a drift through to push your shifter shaft out. And then my shifter forks just drop down, and you want to check your shifter shaft and make sure it's in good condition still. Doesn't seem to be any like significant wear on it. So now your shifter forks just pull right out. They just sit in there loose without the shaft. And this one just comes out here. And they're noticeably different. So the 1-2 shifter fork is quite a bit bigger than the 3-4 shifter fork, so you can't get those mixed up. You just want to make sure you don't lose these little pieces on the top here, and I will not be taking the shifter fork assembly apart quite yet. I'll wait till I've got new shims for that. Now I've got my shifter forks out, I can take my countershaft out. My kicker cover's off. You need it off to get the countershaft out because the countershaft nut is inside of the kicker cover. Okay, so I just clamped my transmission stand down to the bench to make this a little easier so I'm not wrestling. This does have like a little locking plate washer behind it too, so of course you want to fold your tab off of the nut to do that. Just undoes, and then your little plate comes off, and I should be able to just pull this out. Okay, so there's the counter shaft. I'm gonna actually put everything back on the shaft as it came off of it because this is going to be sitting for a while I wait for parts. Okay, so this whole thing should just lift right out of here. And there is my countershaft gear assembly, which I'm going to put right back on the shaft for now. I can take my thrust washer out. And I also wanted to remind you guys about Shovel Fest coming up this year in Creston Valley. BC. It's an annual vintage motorcycle show and shine called Shovel Fest, where the shovel heads are the guests of honor. It's free, so there's no registration. You just show up, and there's lots of camping and other accommodation in the area. So check out my Shovel Fest 2024 video that's going to be linked at the end of this video, and make sure you check the description to get all the information you need, and I hope to see you all there. Alright guys, so now I've got my countershaft out. I'm ready to take my main shaft out, and that's done just by taking the 4 screws out of this plate here that sits inside of the kicker box. So these are just flathead screwdrivers. I do have one screw that's different because I replaced some parts in here and that one screw was screwed, so I had to replace it. So I'm gonna just undo all of these, and then my main shaft should just slide out. I'm gonna just tap this out because it should move with that plate undone. There we go. Now my main shaft should just all slide out except for 3rd gear. It does have a snap ring on it that I'm going to have to take off first. Okay, so I finally got the clip ring off of my main shaft, so I can finally take 3rd gear off of the main shaft and then pull the whole assembly out of the gearbox. And let me tell you, man, getting that clip off of there probably took me longer than this entire transmission job is going to take me by the time it's done. Like, it's crazy. Now that the clip is off, I can just slide my main shaft. Should be able to just slide 3rd gear over like that. Don't really want to let 4th gear pop out because there's supposed to be some needle bearings in there. Okay, and now I've got my 3rd gear. I'm going to put this all back on the main shaft just the way it's coming off. Now 4th gear can come out. This is my 4th gear with pieces of that seal in there, shrapnel. This is just gonna go back on the main shaft for now. So now that my main shaft and my counter shaft are both out of the gearbox, I can disassemble my main shaft, and I just have one more thing to take out of the gearbox, which is the seal, the main shaft seal that sits behind the sprocket. The only way that I've seen these seals removed is by someone tapping them out with like a screwdriver and a hammer, which I don't want to do because of how little space there is between my bearing and my seal. I don't want to end up bending the bearing race or something like that. So I've got a little bit of a janky setup here with my dad's snap-on puller. It seems to be working. I tested it out a little bit, but I've just got a couple blocks of 1x4 sitting in the case, and then I've actually got a 1/2-inch extension that I'm actually using to push against with the puller push rod, I guess is what it would be called. And it seems to be working, so I'm just gonna pull the seal out this way. There we go. This is the seal spacer right here. And since I didn't quite catch it on camera, I just wanted to show you guys the setup that I used for pulling my seal. And what I've got is just a block of wood here, and then I've got the extension there that's actually a 1/2-inch drive extension, and then my puller. And the reason I'm going to have the extension is because the puller pin needs to push against something in the center the way that it's pulling here, so that is what's going on down there. And this pin actually drives through the puller like this, and it'll push up against that extension there, and then that was how I pulled the seal out. Okay, so I'm set up to pull my bearing out, and I had to use a bit of a different method than what I was doing to pull the seal out. I can't actually use my puller. What I've got going on here is I've got a piece of ready rod here. I've got my wrenches on it already because I already had started pulling it, and then I've got a stack of washers. So I've got a big washer on the bottom of the stack here, and that's actually big enough just to cover this hole here in the case. On the other side here, I have the same kind of idea. I've got a little stack of washers, and then I've got a bigger washer that's actually sitting against the race of the bearing. And then I've just got nuts on my ready rod there. So as I tighten the nuts on my ready rod, it'll pull the washer stacked together and pull the bearing out of its little home there. And it should be almost, oh yeah. It is out. There we go. So now my bearing is out, and you can see the whole setup there worked pretty good. And there is my 4th gear bearing. I'll probably end up replacing it. So here's my 4th gear here, and 4th gear actually just rides right inside the bearing like this. And now all I really got to do is take apart my main shaft. I'm going to put this in a vise and pull this nut off. Hopefully it's not on there too tight. All right, so luckily my friend came over just in time to help get the nut off of this main shaft because I was struggling with it. And yeah, luckily he was able to get it because I could not get it. We've got it off, and that's all that matters. It was definitely put on there way too tight. I believe these are only supposed to be 40 or 50 foot-pounds, and this felt like it was more like 100 foot-pounds. It was crazy. All right, so I've just got my main shaft sitting in the vise here, and I don't have it clamped in or anything like that. I've just kind of got it resting on the gear set here, and I'm just going to hold the main shaft as I tap the top of it with my plastic hammer and try to work it down through this gear set. And I'm just pulling down on the main shaft as I do this just to help steady it, and it's moving, and I'm hardly hitting it at all. It's just taps. There we go. So I've got all the parts for my countershaft and my main shaft just sitting in a bin here. Both countershaft and main shaft are completely disassembled at this point. I do just have the gears sitting on the countershaft still just because I wanted to keep everything in its proper order, but I have taken the shaft out and I've inspected it, and I've just felt along it with my fingers and just made sure that there's no grooves or any pitting or any kind of wear that I can feel. The gears all seem to be in good enough condition to be reused. And then my 4th gear here, I wanted to just show you guys this too because it's got a bushing inside of it, and this bushing, just by looking at it, it looks beat up. But I put it on the main shaft here, and I don't know if you guys can see. I'll show you in this camera. It's supposed to be like 1 thou, 1.5 thou. Everything else seems to be good. So I'm gonna have to order some parts, and whenever those show up, I will be able to reassemble this thing. It really sucks waiting for parts, but luckily we do have other jobs on the bike that we can do in the meantime. So I guess that's the bright side. I don't know, more work that needs to be done on a project. I'm not sure if that's a bright side or not, but it keeps you busy at least. But I hope that you guys liked this video, and like always guys, if you like what you see, or if you just like me, or even if you don't like me but you like my bikes, then like, comment, subscribe, do all those things you guys do. And if you want to see me putting this back together, then keep your eyes out for that video. Hopefully my parts show up sooner rather than later, and I can do this job right away. Also guys, if you want to have your bikes featured in an episode on my channel, then you can check the description of this video to find out how you're able to do that. And like always, my lovely YouTube people, I will catch you all on the flip side. Peace. All I can hear is my neighbor screaming at somebody on the phone. Glad I have one of those tools. Can tell you that much. Okay. That's it for this dang video, man. This ding dong dingity video.